Most people spend their entire lives working for money they never actually control. They save it, they protect it, they count it. And quietly, without ever being told directly, they are trained to believe that accumulating more of it is the same thing as becoming wealthy. It is not. And somewhere in the back of your mind, on some level you haven't yet articulated, you already know that. What you're about to hear isn't theory. It isn't motivation. It is simply a different way of seeing, one that most people are never exposed to, not by accident, but by design. You were taught that money is something you earn, that hard work produces it, that saving it keeps you safe, that the person who earns the highest salary is the most financially advanced person in the room. These ideas aren't wrong, exactly. They're just incomplete in a way that costs most people everything. The employee who earns $200,000 a year and the billionaire sitting across from him do not have the same relationship with money. They don't even speak the same language when it comes to capital. What the employee sees as income, the billionaire sees as cash flow, a temporary state, a transient condition, not a destination. What the employee sees as savings, the billionaire sees as dead weight, money that is sitting still, slowly losing the only thing that makes money useful, momentum. The difference between these two people isn't discipline. It isn't intelligence, not in the traditional sense. It is a fundamentally different understanding of what money actually is. To the billionaire, money is not a reward. It is not something you receive in exchange for effort. It is a tool, a medium, a signal. And like any tool, its value isn't in how much of it you possess. It's in how precisely you can direct it. Think about that word, direction. The wealthy don't talk about saving money the way the middle class does. They talk about deploying it, positioning it, moving it. The vocabulary itself reveals the philosophy. You don't deploy something you're afraid to lose. You deploy something you understand well enough to send somewhere specific and expect it to return with more attached to it. This is the first thing that separates the ultra-wealthy from everyone else. They are not trying to hold money. They are trying to move it through systems that generate more of it. The money itself is almost irrelevant. The system is everything. There is a concept that rarely gets discussed in public financial spaces, and it goes like this. The wealthy do not primarily seek to own things. They seek to control them. This distinction sounds subtle. It isn't. Consider a man who owns a building outright. He has clear title. He also has tax liability, maintenance liability, illiquidity. His capital is frozen in brick and mortar. Now consider another man who controls a portfolio of buildings through structured entities, who determines what happens to those assets, who benefits from their cash flows, who decides when they're sold, while his personal exposure remains carefully limited. He controls far more than he owns, and his money remains in motion. The wealthy have a word for this, though they rarely say it out loud. Leverage. Not leverage in the reckless sense, not borrowed money used carelessly. Leverage in the architectural sense. The ability to multiply impact without multiplying risk proportionally. The ability to have your decisions affect 10 times more than your direct capital would suggest. This is why a billionaire can have a relatively modest salary and an enormous net worth. Because salary is what you earn. Net worth is what you've built. And what you build doesn't come from working harder. It comes from constructing systems that work while you don't. Here's a mental model that the wealthy use without naming it. Money flows toward control, not toward effort. You can work 16 hours a day and produce income. But income requires your continued presence. The moment you stop, it stops. This is not wealth. This is a sophisticated form of dependency. You are, in the most precise sense, renting out your time in exchange for currency. The currency stops the moment the rental agreement ends. Now consider an alternative. You spend those same years, not working more hours, but building the architecture of control, acquiring assets that generate cash without your involvement. developing systems that run on logic rather than labor, positioning yourself inside structures where your decision-making is worth more than your execution. The money doesn't stop when you stop. It actually accelerates because it's no longer bottlenecked through the narrow channel of your personal output. The shift from income to cash flow, from ownership to control, from effort to systems. This is not a philosophical abstraction. This is the actual mechanism by which generational wealth is built. There is something else that almost never gets discussed in mainstream financial conversation. The ultra-wealthy have a fundamentally different relationship with liquidity. To most people, cash is comfort. Having money in the bank feels like safety. And in a certain narrow sense, it is. But to someone who understands capital at a deeper level, cash sitting still is quietly dying. Inflation is not a news headline to the wealthy. It is a mechanism they actively account for and, in many cases, exploit. So the wealthy keep a very precise amount of liquid capital, enough to move fast when opportunity appears, enough to remain stable in turbulence, but not a dollar more than necessary. Everything beyond that threshold is doing something. It's positioned, it's working, it is pointed somewhere specific. The middle class hoards liquidity because it feels safe. The wealthy maintain liquidity because it enables speed. Same asset, completely different purpose. Imagine someone who came into a significant sum of money, not inherited, not lucky, but earned through a transaction, a business sale, a liquidity event of some kind. Two things can happen next. The first person takes that capital and does what they were conditioned to do. They diversify it across conventional instruments. Maybe they buy a home outright. Maybe they put the rest in index funds and call it wealth preservation. They feel safe. They feel responsible. The second person sees that capital not as an ending, but as an opening position. They don't ask, how do I protect this? They ask, what can I control with this? They look for asymmetric situations, places where a relatively small amount of directed capital gives them outsized influence over outcomes. They structure rather than spend. They position rather than hold. And within 5 years, the gap between these two people is not marginal, it is almost incomprehensible. Same starting point, completely different outcome. Not because of luck, because of a fundamentally different framework for what money is supposed to do. There is a moment in a person's financial life. It doesn't come at a specific age or income level. It comes when a certain understanding settles into place, where they stop asking, how do I make more money? And start asking, how do I build a structure that generates money? This shift doesn't sound dramatic, but it changes everything. Because once you stop thinking of yourself as someone who earns and starts thinking of yourself as someone who builds, once money becomes something you direct rather than something you chase, the entire game reconfigures. You start evaluating time differently. Not every hour of effort is worth the same. An hour spent constructing a system is worth more than a year of executing inside one you don't own. You start evaluating risk differently. Risk isn't something to be avoided. It's something to be understood precisely enough to accept only the portions that have asymmetric upside. The wealthy are not reckless, but they are not afraid. Fear of risk is itself a financial liability. You start evaluating money differently. It stops being a number on a screen and starts being a resource with direction, velocity, and purpose. Now I want you to sit with something. The financial education you received, in school, from your family, from culture, was not designed to teach you how capital actually works. It was designed to teach you how to participate in an economy as a productive unit, pay taxes, spend consistently, borrow responsibly, save incrementally, retire eventually. There is nothing malicious in this. It is simply a system reproducing itself. A system that needs people to work, consume, and remain within predictable financial behavior. Not because you don't deserve more, but because the system was not built to teach you how it operates at the top. That knowledge was not filtered out of your education through conspiracy. It was simply never included. The language of capital formation, of leverage, of control structures, of cash flow architecture, these are not secrets. They exist in books, in deal rooms, in conversations between people who've already made the shift. But they were never part of the curriculum. Not for you, not for most people. Understanding this isn't a reason for resentment. It's a reason for precision, because now you know what you're actually learning, and more importantly, what you were never taught. The wealthy person in a room is rarely the loudest, rarely the most visibly successful. They are often the calmest, because calm is a function of understanding. When you know how a system works, it stops being threatening. When you understand money at this level, you stop being afraid of it, chasing it, or worshiping it. It becomes something simpler and more powerful than any of that. A tool. And tools, in the right hands, directed with precision, toward the right systems, build things that last for generations. If this changed the way you see money, you're starting to see the game. Not the version of it you were sold, the actual one. The next move is yours.